Right now, Iran and the United States are locked in a tense and explosive rivalry. From nuclear negotiations to proxy wars across the Middle East, from sanctions crippling Iran's economy to American forces stationed across the Persian Gulf, and now, the ongoing US-Iran conflict. The hostility is constant. But why? Why does this conflict feel so personal and ideological, especially for Iran? And why does it feel so unending? To understand the battle between Washington and Tehran, we have to rewind history, because this rivalry didn't begin with nuclear centrifuges or drone strikes. It didn't begin with chants of death to America either. It began over a century ago, in the struggle over sovereignty, oil, power, and identity. To understand modern Iran, we must start before the Islamic Republic, before the Ayatollahs, even before the Shah. We must begin with Qajar Iran. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, Iran was ruled by the Qajar dynasty. On paper, it was a kingdom with a monarch. In reality, it was weak, fragmented, and heavily influenced by foreign powers, particularly Britain and Russia. For everyday Iranians, life was difficult. The state was poorly centralized. Tribal leaders held power in the provinces. Infrastructure was limited. Education was minimal outside religious institutions. And perhaps, most painfully, foreign powers controlled large parts of the economy through concessions. Britain secured sweeping oil rights in southern Iran. Russia dominated trade in the north. The monarchy borrowed heavily from abroad and taxed its own people harshly to survive. By the early 1900s, frustration boiled over. Intellectuals, merchants, and clerics demanded reform. This led to the Constitutional Revolution of 1905 to 1911, which forced the Shah to create a parliament. But instability remained. Iran was humiliated during World War I. Foreign troops from both the Allied and Central Powers occupied its territory, and famine devastated the population. The Qajar state appeared incapable of defending national sovereignty. Into that chaos stepped a soldier. In 1921, an officer named Reza Khan led a military coup. Within a few years, he would crown himself Reza Shah, founder of the Pahlavi dynasty. Reza Shah promised strength, order, and modernization, and he did deliver, but at a cost. He centralized the state, crushed tribal autonomy, built a national army, introduced secular courts, expanded railways, and invested in education. He banned certain traditional dress, limited clerical power, and sought to secularize society. In 1935, he even formally asked foreign governments to refer to the country as Iran instead of Persia. For many urban elites, this was progress. For many religious conservatives, it was cultural aggression. But there was one thing almost all Iranians appreciated: sovereignty. Reza Shah reduced direct foreign interference. He projected strength. However, during World War II, his attempt to remain neutral while maintaining ties with Germany alarmed Britain and the Soviet Union. In 1941, they invaded Iran and forced him to abdicate. His son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, took the throne, and this is where the seeds of modern conflict truly take root. After World War II, a new political energy emerged in Iran. Nationalism surged. Oil, black gold, became the symbol of both wealth and humiliation. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, controlled by Britain, dominated Iran's oil industry. Iran received only a fraction of the profits. Meanwhile, Britain prospered. Public outrage grew. In 1951, a charismatic nationalist politician named Mohammad Mossadegh was democratically elected prime minister. He had one central promise: nationalize Iran's oil. And he did. Mossadegh moved to seize control of Iranian oil from British hands. For many Iranians, this was the ultimate act of independence, reclaiming their economic destiny. But for Britain, it was unacceptable. They imposed sanctions, they pressured allies, and when Britain failed to topple Mossadegh alone, they turned to a rising superpower, the United States. In 1953, because the US and the British loved democracy so much, the CIA and British intelligence orchestrated a coup in a covert operation known as 1953 Iranian coup d'etat. They funded protests, they bribed officials, they manipulated media narratives. Eventually, Mossadegh was arrested, and the Shah was restored with expanded powers. Why? Not because Mossadegh was a dictator. He was elected. Not because he was communist. He wasn't. but because Western powers feared losing control of oil and worried Iran might drift towards Soviet influence during the Cold War. To many Iranians, 1953 was betrayal. It taught them a lesson. Democracy would be tolerated only if it aligned with Western interests, and that wound never healed. The Shah, restored to power, ruled for another 26 years. Backed by US military and financial support, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi launched the White Revolution in the 1960s. Land reforms, women's suffrage, industrial expansion, literacy campaigns. On the surface, Iran modernized rapidly. Tehran became cosmopolitan. Oil wealth poured in during the 1970s. But beneath the surface, authoritarianism deepened. The Shah's secret police, Savak, suppressed dissent. Political parties were tightly controlled. Clerics were marginalized. Wealth inequality widened. Many felt modernization was being imposed from above, detached from Iranian culture and religion. Among the Shah's fiercest critics was a cleric named Ruhollah Khomeini. Exiled for years, Khomeini criticized both the Shah's dictatorship and Western influence. His message blended Islam, nationalism, and anti-imperialism. By 1978, protests exploded across the country. Strikes paralyzed the economy. Millions marched.
It's possible in which to create a political solution. Demonstrations like these today in Tehran are a daily occurrence in towns throughout the country now, and one sign of the fact there is nothing less than a kind of revolution being attempted here, trying to change the form of Iran's government, and unlikely to settle easily for any solution which still keeps the Shah on his throne.
The Shah fled in January 1979, and in February, Khomeini returned to Iran. The Iranian Revolution had succeeded. Iran transformed from monarchy to Islamic Republic. Since 1979, Iran's foreign policy has been shaped by one principle: resistance to Western domination. The US embassy hostage crisis that same year cemented hostility. Sanctions followed. Diplomatic ties were severed. Under Khomeini, Iran promoted revolutionary ideology and opposed both the United States and regional rivals like Iraq and Saudi Arabia. The devastating Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s entrenched a siege mentality. In the 1990s and early 2000s, there were moments of reform and attempted détente, particularly under President Mohammad Khatami, but mistrust remained. The US invasion of Iraq in 2003 ironically expanded Iran's regional influence. Tehran built alliances with militias and governments across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. The nuclear issue became central. Iran insisted its program was peaceful. The West feared weaponization. The 2015 nuclear deal briefly reduced tensions, but its collapse reignited confrontation.
The fact is, this was a horrible, one-sided deal that should have never, ever been made. It didn't bring calm, it didn't bring peace, and it never will.
Today, Iran positions itself as leader of an axis of resistance, opposing US influence and Israeli power in the region. And from Tehran's perspective, it all traces back to 1953, to foreign interference, to the belief that sovereignty must be defended at all costs. So modern Iran is not simply an anti-American regime. It is a state shaped by humiliation under foreign concessions, anger over a coup against a democratic leader, resentment toward imposed modernization, and a revolution born from both religious conviction and nationalist pride. Understanding Qajar weakness explains the obsession with sovereignty. Understanding the 1953 coup explains the distrust of Western intentions. Understanding the Shah explains the rejection of Western-backed authoritarian modernization. And understanding 1979 explains the ideological posture of today's Islamic Republic. Iran is an ancient civilization, thousands of years old, but its modern political identity was forged in the 20th century through struggle, intervention, and revolution. As for the future, Iran faces economic pressure, generational shifts, internal dissent, and geopolitical confrontation. Its young population has been questioning clerical authority. Sanctions continue to strain the economy. Regional tensions keep simmering. But one thing remains consistent: the fierce desire for independence. The story of modern Iran is the story of a nation determined never again to be controlled from the outside, even if that determination places it in permanent confrontation with global powers. And until that historical wound is understood, the rivalry between Iran and the United States will never truly make sense.